Well, this is the Aeon Byte interview, but it's not the Aeon Byte interview. It is our first ever Finding Hermes podcast, which I've been talking about since the beginning of the year, and now it's a reality for reasons I'll disclose. And I can't think of a better guest than my friend, a person I admire much and whose work has informed me for many years, and that is Eric G. Wilson. Eric, thanks for coming back or being here for the first time.
Miguel, it is my pleasure. It's always a treat to talk to you.
Yeah. So how have you been in 2020?
Well, probably like everybody else, pushed down by the demiurge.
Yeah.
But I'm managing quite well. And as I was saying, I feel quite fortunate. It could be much worse. We're doing okay down here.
Yes, yes. Many people are suffering. Many people are under a lot of stress and a lot of fear, which is a reason I started this sort of feature of Aeon Byte. Of course, the Gnostics were always, you might say, history's first depth psychologists. When you read their texts, they were very much into mental and emotional healing, not just transcending the world. And of course, Jung and others have noticed this. And I felt I needed, this is in January, I said, I need to find something to really work more surgical on mental health issues, alcoholism, stuff that you and I have talked about in the past, and just, conversations. You've written books, you've been very transparent about your life. And once the pandemic hit and the social unrest, I said, I'm going to make this a reality. I'm going to go for it. And here we are. So my first question, of course, is Aristotle basically said that a poet is better at understanding history than a historian, because they deal with universals. They see the big picture. You, Eric, you're both a poet and a historian. So I thought I'd ask you, from an archetypal, mythic, or literary view, how do you see 2020?
Well, it's I'll start out with the particular, and maybe my particular experience can move to the universal. I think 2020 has snuck up on me in terms of mental health. As you know, I've discussed on this show and in my work that I struggle with bipolar disorder. I've also struggled with issues of addiction concerning alcohol. And I've been through a lot of therapy over the years. I've taken a lot of medication over the years, and I felt like I had come to a pretty good place. I got divorced 3 years ago. I'm now engaged to be married again. So there's a lot of hope in my life. But about a month ago, it's like the darkness came in again. And what I realize is that, part of my curse, I guess, maybe as a thoughtful person, maybe as someone who has bipolar disorder, is to be a very sensitive person and kind of hypersensitive. And what I thought I had managed, which was my mental health, I realized I had not. So I had to re-enter therapy. And interestingly enough, my therapist said, he's trained as a Zen Buddhist as well as a practitioner of mindfulness. He said, that history itself goes in rhythms, and sometimes history itself can go through a kind of melancholy time. He didn't get astrological, but there's a sense that sometimes Saturn, the melancholy planet, will take over, and you can see it as obviously a burden, a test, a catastrophe, but also you can see it as an invitation to look into places inside you've not looked before, and try to find reserves of strength you've not looked before. That was a powerful thing he said to me. So I'm so glad we're having this conversation. I've gone back into therapy very heavily now, and I'm trying to take him seriously and see history itself in a kind of melancholy moment, and that being an invitation to slow down. A lot of us are taken away from our daily schedules. We're taken away from our responsibilities, and that makes us anxious. But also we could say, hey, that's good. I'm forced to look within. I'm forced to sit down. I'm forced to stare at a wall. So I'm trying to take that very seriously. And I'm 53, and as I move into that I don't know what phase I would call it. Definitely another phase of my life. I really want to. I'm trying to be more responsible to the people that I'm close to. I've done a lot of therapy work that's focused very much on me, and I think that was necessary. But also there could be a little narcissism there. So I guess to answer your question, I would say, if I could bring the poet and me and the historian together, I would say that the positive way to see this time. And again, I've had it very easy compared to a lot, but a positive way to see this time is an invitation to sit, an invitation to look within, and yes, think about yourself, but also think about yourself in relation to others, with maybe a new kind of rigor. And what I've realized, that mental health for me is less about interior exploration and more about how I relate to other people. I guess that's the main insight I've had in the past year or two of my life.
Yeah, that's a great insight. I can say for me, similar. Once the pandemic hit, I was at a stage of my life where things had fallen apart, some business ventures and other things, nothing major. But when the pandemic hit, I could feel this energy coming within me, like everybody, the unknown, the anxiety, the fear. And it was so intense. I looked inside of myself. Before the interview, talked about an apocalypse. There was a personal apocalypse, and I saw inside myself. And I realized, like you, the house was not in order. There is still those 100 forms of fears. There are trauma, there are complexes, shadows that needed attention. And my jaw dropped to my floor. It's like, holy shit. I thought I would, like you, I'm putt-putting. It's okay. I'm a middle-aged guy, gonna get there. Yeah. But I'm so grateful for it, because I had to pivot, a reason we're having this interview. But I also realized my goal was to inspire others. I think that was the real realization. Is like, I have a short time, and the best I can do beyond looking inside myself is to really inspire others with as much of what I can offer to the world. Mm-hmm. And that's basically, while things were falling apart, things were coming together in my life from all these features and opportunities that I've had. So it's been an incredible experience, and I hope it continues. And like you, I mean, we've talked before, Eric, bipolar is hard because you never beat it. It's always going to shift. It's like the alien or something, one of those monsters. It does shift, and what works yesterday is not going to work. And if you think you're out of the woods, that monster is coming right for you. So, I mean, you agree with that? The challenge of being bipolar.
Well, Jung has this really fancy term, enantiodromia, which is Heraclitus' term for running the other way. And what he meant by that is, the harder we repress a fear or a desire, the more monstrously it will come back to get us. It will run the other way. And I think you're exactly right. This idea that you can somehow beat bipolar, I didn't quite use that language, but I thought I had it managed. I thought, one reason I was so distraught by my mental health all these years, because I was in a bad marriage. I thought, I'm out of a bad marriage now, so I'm good. Well, when I wasn't looking, it came back, and it attacked me really, really hard. And so there's a vigilance I've learned that is required. In some ways, managing my bipolar is my life's work. And I think anyone who suffers from mental health issues, or indeed anyone who just wants to live the life of the soul, that's a life's work in which we must be ever vigilant. And of course, it can be exhausting sometimes. But to go back briefly to what you were saying at the beginning of what you just said, I feel like, yes, I've been broken down in a lot of ways by the virus. Many of us have, but that showed me things about myself. But even culturally, we've had so many breakdowns. With the Black Lives Matter, for instance, we've just had some major societal upheavals, a lot of pain, a lot of trauma, but also people have come together in ways that they haven't in a very long time. So there have been positives, to come out of this, not only individually for me, but also in terms of our overall culture, I think.
Yeah. And as I always say, the answers seem to be always there. We talked years ago about not having to feel bad about our mental issues. I think somebody said depathologizing thinking. And that's one of the things I realized this year, is I don't have to be ashamed of these forces that are coming from the unconscious, even my bipolarism, because these are all a message that my unconscious, that the gods, that the pleroma is telling me. And if I learn to listen and navigate and sort of take the surf, I'll really be doing my own destiny. I think, what did Jung say? Free will is doing exactly what you're supposed to be. In other words, there's no free will. The psyche has the agenda, and it's whether my ego wants the pain or wants to be like Jonah, fighting, being in, always fighting and being in the whale. I think those are the two choices.
Nietzsche called it the amor fati, the love of fate, that we are destined to be who we are, and we can choose to love that destiny or fight against that destiny. And I think as being born with any kind of mental health issue, yeah, that's your destiny. That's what you were dealt with when you were born, and you can choose how you're going to address it. I feel like when I'm at my best, I feel like my bipolar disorder is my great gift. I feel like that's what's given me a lot of pain, but also it's given me my curiosity. It's given me my desire to imagine other ways to exist beyond this. It's inspired me to write and to teach. Now, I don't always see it that way. Sometimes I was like, "Fuck this shit." This is terrible. I don't want to be bipolar. I want to be non. But it is. I have it, and everybody has something. Even if a person isn't clinically depressed, we all have our demons. Obviously, that's what Jung says. So, I like this idea that you just articulated about how to listen to the voice within, to listen to the voice of, Jung would call it the collective unconscious. We can call it all sorts of things, our deep interiors. I feel like the older I get, the more I psychologize the Gnostic mythology. And we all have a demiurge in our mind. We all have an Ealdabaoth, lurking around. William Blake called it the covering cherub. He said that we have within us these forces that block us from Eden. Just as God put two cherubs with flaming swords at the gate of Eden after he cast Adam and Eve out. And so this noise that blocks out this inner voice, the demiurge, the Ealdabaoth within, it's tricky. And I feel like I got duped in a way by saying, "Oh, I'm mentally healthy. I'm okay. I've got it. I don't need to do the work anymore." So there's that. But also, to go back to what you said, there's that seduction of feeling guilty for saying, "Hey, I'm fucked up, and I've got to spend some time dealing with it." And, I think there's still a stigma attached to mental health in our culture. It's gotten a lot better in the past 25 years, but the courage it takes to say, "I have this problem and I need to take care of it." Well, that means I may not be able to make all my appointments. That means I may not be able to be the ideal father and husband all the time. I'm going to try. I think that's a part of the mental, I guess, the mental disease life that doesn't often get addressed is that you have to kind of say to people, I'm going to be a fuck up sometimes, given the traditional expectations of being a human being. And that's just how it's going to be. I mean, it's hard for me to do that. I was raised in a Protestant household. So, I still feel tremendous guilt. But that's just something I'm struggling with. And again, that voice of guilt is the demiurge within saying, "Oh no, don't take care of yourself. Don't do it. You're okay. Don't do it."
You don't need anybody. You got that. Yeah, that's what they always say in AA. The worst sentence any alcoholic can say is, "I've got this." We're screwed. We're like Yaldabaoth. We're going to create a horrible universe. And yeah, I agree with you. And again, there's nothing wrong with us if we listen to the psyche. We're just all different. We all need help, like, all the time. And I'm glad there's a bipolar Eric, because you created Against Happiness, Secret Cinema. My business is to create. All the knowledge that you've given about Blake has inspired me and probably inspired many people. Of course, like you, when I'm on my manic down, it's irrelevant. I just have to ride that horrible wave. I wanted to read this for you because this is very powerful. Excuse me. It's because I have to always remember, and you've written about David Foster Wallace, and it's from the New York Times. I wanted to read it to you because it reminds me, when I'm at the depths, where I really am, and how, in a way, it helps me to get out of it, because I know it's not true. Just like the manic highs it's a lie. But it's an article from the New York Times. Wallace described clinical depression as, quote, "the great white shark of pain, a level of psychic pain wholly incompatible with human life as we know it, a nausea of the cells and soul, a sort of double bind in which all of the alternatives we associate with human agency sitting or standing, doing or resting, speaking or keeping silent, living or dying are not just unpleasant, but literally horrible. A radical loneliness in which everything is part of the problem and there is no solution. Somehow this really helps me. Am I strange, Eric? Because it's like he's describing where I am, or where I am sometimes.
Not at all. He is the great chronicler of our age of mental illness. And of course, it breaks my heart that what happened. And this is an example. I often hear people say, "Oh my gosh, he was so selfish that he killed himself," this and that. But when you hear something like that, you realize that probably if someone's going to do that, the pain is so intense that the next breath of life seems impossible. I mean, fortunately, I've not been to that precipice. I've certainly seen it, and I suspect you have too. The thing about Wallace for me is he's been a true soul doctor for me. I mean, for years now, I've taught his work, I've read his work, and what's so powerful about his work to me is the therapeutic power of fiction making. I might put it in that famous commencement speech he gave at Kenyon College called "This Is Water." He basically says, if you're standing in the grocery line and you see this, this woman with extremely loud kids in front of you, and those kids are screaming, they're bothering you. She seems so unpleasant. She's so abrasive. And you just think, oh my God, I wish these people would just go away. Don't do that, but imagine her in a narrative of, her husband of 30 years just left her. She has bipolar disorder herself. And in other words, imagine a kind of narrative in which you would treat her with compassion. It doesn't matter if it's real or not. And this is what I think about more and more in my own therapy. I guess you could call it's a form of mindfulness, but the idea that our lives are a narrative that we create. And if we find ourselves deeply depressed, we're caught in a bad narrative. And we have the ability to come up with a new way to imagine our lives. That's the great gift of Wallace, I think. So for me, that brings together, I guess, my passions, which is, of course, writing and creativity, and to think about ultimately what will make me feel better is my imagination. I'm caught in a bad story, so maybe I can revise it or alter it. You can't make a new one, but you can revise and alter it. I think that's really powerful.
Yeah, there's a line that I love by God, even cowgirls get the blues. Robbins, who's the author? Tony?
Yes.
Yeah. Tim Robbins. Sorry, I was going to Tony Robbins.
I like it. Tony Robbins, another story entirely.
Well, he helps too. He's all
really. Yeah, I have to admit, he's a pretty powerful.
Yeah, I enjoy his work. I enjoy it. It's just NLP for Westerners. That's basically for continental Westerners.
That's exactly right. Yeah, that's good.
We rewiring your brain, but he always said it's never too late to have a happy childhood. And I realized, yes, we can rewrite. Yeah, we can't change it, but we can create new perspectives of why things happen to us and why we're here.
Yeah.
It's and I don't know if this happens to you, but I'm being very personal here. I used to be the kind of 3 days up and down, and I've been going to therapy and doing a lot of work on myself now for years. I haven't let up because, again, I know that monster. But I've been diagnosed as a rapid cycler. Have you heard of that? Because I used to think, well, do I have ADD? But the thing is, I will cycle so fast, like during the day and in a split second, I will forget data that I had when I was here because I'm down here. It's almost like it's a split personality. Mm-hmm. And that's why I've had 2 therapists telling me that's why I forget things. That's why everything seems like a blur sometimes, because I've become a rapid cycler because I've somehow been able to fight this disease, but now it's sort of crunched up during the day.
Oh God, it sounds terrible. Yeah.
It just is what it is. I mean, again, you learn to navigate.
Yeah. Well, I don't know about you, but I found the older I get, the more infrequent the mania, and the more frequent the depression. as our testosterone goes down, people who are bipolar tend to get the depression more than mania, that's just another way of saying that's something I'm having to adjust to, because I used to the manias were dangerous, but sometimes they felt pretty great. But they don't come around much anymore.
Yeah, they're not as intense.
This, Wallace. If we can go back to David Foster Wallace
So,
for
of
a
course.
second, he also has some interesting things to say about cliche. He himself struggled with addiction. He was an alcoholic and had to go through a lot of rehab for that. And he said, if you go to AA or any kind of rehab program, you get all these helpful cliches like, fake it till you make it or something like that. And he says, okay, from one point of view, it's a cliche. It's stale. It's like a bumper sticker. It's not powerful. But he says, but if you think about it, maybe it is. If whatever it takes to sort of get you out of where you are. And it's funny, my therapist is a big movie guy. And he says, sometimes when I'm really in a bad place, I'll like pick a favorite movie character and I'll say, I'm going to be like that guy just today. Yeah, which sounds silly and trivial, but it kind of can defamiliarize you. It can kind of shake you out a little bit of those habits that are keeping you bound in. So I guess I've become more and more interested in this idea of defamiliarization, of just shaking up your psyche a tiny bit, like shaking it loose a little bit, or giving it like another way to see the world. And to me, that's what powerful art can really do. If you look at Van Gogh's Starry Night, wow, and then you go outside and look at the stars, well, they're not quite the same, right? Or if you read Whitman's Leaves of Grass, you won't see the blade of grass quite the same way. So that's been another way of just thinking about the power of the imagination. Just because for me, depression is largely getting caught in a rut. Blake calls it the same dull round. When I'm depressed, every experience feels exactly the same as every other experience. It fucking sucks. It's like channel surfing, and you've seen every show several times, but you can't stop channel surfing. It's that kind of feeling where time is just like one goddamn thing after another.
Like Bob Geldof in the movie The Wall.
Yes, that's
Alan
exactly
Parker,
it.
yeah, he's just sitting
exactly there. Yeah, I mean that's depression to me. One way to think about it. So anything to like find a new station, right, or or get another TV set. I mean these are kind of cliche ways to talk about mental health, but the older I get, the less kind of sophisticated I care to be. I mean, if like whatever works, whatever gets you through the night, it's all right.
Lennon, yeah.
If it's a bad movie you like to watch, it makes you feel a tiny bit better. If it distracts you from your angst, fucking do it.
Yeah, I agree with you. Some of those cliches, you just hold on to them when you're in the middle of a storm or you feel the unknown is in front of you. Yeah, fake it till you make it, one day at a time. They make sense, and I think they're all part of also the idea of the egregore that I've been studying, sort of, a toolbar, the psychic energy that you create with a group that is protective, and it envelops you, and it's for the group to reach a goal, which I've seen AA become, or that's how I see AA and other groups that I go to. And I think it's been very helpful.
It's powerful. I mean, what you've just described is a Gnostic sect. You're creating a myth in a way that protects you against the cruel aeons up in the sky. I mean, I think that's fantastic. And I have to say that I've never really been close to my colleagues in my academic department. I've had a few good friends, but for the most part, I don't like hanging out with academics. They're pretentious and boring for the most part. But during this virus, we don't know what we're doing, so we've been talking a lot on Zoom, and a kind of new language has emerged. We're now talking in a very personal way about how we teach, and we just let each other in. And suddenly, it's a little bit like what you're talking about. It's become a kind of impromptu therapy community, and we've created terms that almost have a kind of word magic, that give us this sense of we're protected because we're together here. And I just love that idea of like the pop-up Gnostic community in a time of crisis. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's what the Gnostics did. If something seems stuffy or you don't like it, like Wallace reinvented, create, like the Valentinians go to Catholic Church and they would just reinvent the entire with AA. And of course, I did that when I thought AA was pretty stuffy. And then you start doing some study and you realize that Jung was extremely influential to AA. Bill W. admits it and wrote letters to Jung at the end of his life saying, you gave me the first 2-3 steps and all this other stuff. Yeah, so I don't know, maybe I'm recreating reality, but no, that's a fact. That's a fact. So
Well, I feel like the Valentinians going to Catholic Church is fabulous, but just the kind of revisionary impulse the Gnostics had toward the Judeo-Christian tradition. It's like they looked at the God of Genesis and they said, well, he's not quite what you thought. And they created this whole new language. I mean, obviously, it's crazy language, like we've already thrown out the Aldebaoth and the Pleroma and all this stuff. It's crazy, but it forces you to see all those old, stale mythological figures in a fresh light. Gnosticism, for all of its specialized vocabulary, I agree with you. It's kind of a fight against stuffiness in a way.
Yeah, what you can call the dull, bone crunching normalcy of life, which is just as dangerous as being manic or depressed. You know, it can kill you too.
Give me my mania and depression for that. Not that I've escaped it with my mania and depression either, but yeah.
Yeah, very interesting. And going to the theme of this Hermes, I'd like to share. Excuse me. It was basically I read a book, Richard Smalley, many years ago, The Dice Game of Shiva, and he has a passage where he says Hermes is the god of the mind and the god of tricks. That is not an accident. The Greeks knew it. And I read this book years ago, and it struck me so true, and one of those things that stayed me. And of course, Hermes is the god of transition, the god of doorways. He's the trickster. Hermes will lead the way or lead astray. He is this sort of crazy logos, very much like the Gnostic Jesus. And it is true that our minds are Hermes. I mean, do you have any idea, Eric? Do you ever wonder, why is the human mind such a double-edged sword? I mean, for everybody, not just everybody.
I mean, I'm sure that we can describe that with using evolution, but the mind feels excessive. It feels like it's got more going on than we need to survive. I'm not coming up with any theory now, but yeah, I think you and I both have kind of made that our life's work, is trying to think about thought, trying to be conscious of consciousness. And if you suffer from depression, you know that your mind is Hermes in a very deep way, right? Because your mind is what can kill you. I mean, that's what depression is: your mind trying to trick you into valuing death over life, and not necessarily physical death, but kind of metaphorical death. Just valuing, not wanting to participate in the energies that bring joy to other people. But I've gotten into mindfulness therapy more lately, and I really think it's powerful. The whole kind of, I mean, I did a lot of kind of Jungian work, and that was really helpful at a certain time in my life. But I feel like I need to look outside more. So this idea of like training the mind. Yeah, knowing it can trick you, but trying to take its energy like it's a stallion, right? You got to break it in a way, right? But so then you can ride it in a beautiful fashion. I don't do that successfully, but I'm trying to. This idea that, what's making me sad? Well, I'm not getting along with my daughter. What are like 2 things I can do each day that might help me get along better with my daughter? Whatever they are, I'll do them, right? It's like forming these new sort of habits. So I guess on the one hand, my consciousness is infinite and mysterious and crazed and wonderful and dark and destructive. But at the same time, I've got to get up and go to work. So I've got to kind of figure out a way to channel it, I guess, into healthier conduits. That's what I've been working on anyway.
Yeah, that makes sense. As they say, the mind is a wonderful servant, but a terrible master. If it gets a hold of us, it's going to destroy it. And it's interesting because I know in the when Bill W. and Carl Jung were corresponding, Carl Jung was in his sort of he was towards the twilight of his life, and he told Bill W., nope, there is a dark archetype out there. Basically, he said there is the demiurge or the devil. It's independent. You can't integrate it like the shadow. And not everybody has it, but once you allow it into your mind, it's going to kill you. Because that's all Jung could say is, why do people, drug addicts, alcoholics like us, bipolars, why do we have this penchant for destruction? So, and I'm sure you've experienced it, and I'm sure you've studied a lot of authors that were like that.
Well, I can see why people believe in the devil. I really, I really, I mean,
No other
I
explanation,
get
no
that.
logical. It's not logical.
I get that. I mean, there's got to be a name for that self-destructive force that we have within us that defies all logic and all reason and all. It's perverse. That all of us, those with depression more so, have within us this. Poe calls it the imp of the perverse. This part in us that just wants to fuck us up, that wants to destroy us and kill us.
And others too, unfortunately.
And other, yeah, of course, others too. So I mean, I would believe that. You can call it the devil, you can call it the dark archetype, and that, to go back to what we were talking about earlier, you can't get rid of it. Right? You can't, you can't eradicate the duality. I mean, the polarity's there. Just like you can't have day without night, you can't have the joy without the pain. In some ways, that's a facile thing to say, but I think I got to the point where I was existing thinking that, oh, well, there's really no devil. It's okay. But just then, oh, no, wait a minute. I look just like the devil if I see myself in this light. So
it's all in my head. Oh, yeah, the devil really is in my head.
I've not gone through AA, but I've talked to some people who work in mindfulness, and they say, of course, there are a lot of mindfulness overlaps too. Just the whole idea of the 10 steps, the whole idea of like just doing things externally. I mean, you do the meditation, the inner gaze, and you and I've done that a lot, and that's so powerful. But I wasn't adding that extra step of, oh, that means you've got to figure out a way to translate those insights into action, and that's hard to do. Especially if you really like it inside there, as I do. So just trying to come up with actions that, and again, they can be very banal. Like I'll wash the dishes really well tonight. Something as simple as that I'm finding can make a gigantic difference. Again, for connecting to other people. For the longest time, I thought I was an introvert, but now I'm thinking maybe I'm not. I mean, I feel like I really need people. The older I get, the less I like to be alone, strangely enough. And so I'm trying to come up with ways to connect with others, and because I think that will be really important for my mental health.
Yeah, especially today. Yeah, I haven't gone to a meeting in months. I admit it. I've been bad, mostly because the thought of sitting in a room with having to share with a mask on, I'm like, no, I'm going to find other ways. But eventually I'll get to, and I also see AA or really anything as a mystery religion. The 4-step inner inventory, having to say your amends. You are going into the darkness and you are fighting these demons in Hades. And I see that in AA and so many other disciplines too.
Yeah. The dark night of the soul remains one of the most powerful metaphors. I mean, St. John of the Cross, in his great book from 16th century called The Dark Night of the Soul, of course, and the whole idea of negative theology, which we know is very integral to Gnosticism, that the only way to find the light is to go into very deep darkness. And when you get to the very deepest darkness, you have to have the strongest light possible to reach down there. But you got to get down there. And I mean, I really feel like that doesn't go away either. But that's a different kind of darkness. I mean, to me, that's the darkness of embracing confusion, of embracing your flaws, embracing your mistakes, but doing it with an eye toward moving out of that darkness into a new light. So in a way, you're choosing your darkness. I mean, there's that kind of flat darkness of the devilish archetype we're talking about, and that's just what depression feels like to me. It's a flatness. Wallace talked about how standing up or sitting down both seem excruciating. For me, it's more standing up and sitting down both seem equally unappealing, right? It's like I don't really want to do anything. It's like everything seems equally insignificant and stupid. Is how I feel when I'm depressed. So it is a kind of flat line, a kind of numbness or lethargy. But that generative darkness, the dark night of the soul, that takes work. That you gotta dig down there, and that's why you need Hermes. Hermes is, I think, also the psychopompus, right? Who leads down into the underworld. And that's when I need Hermes the most, is going down in there. And again, I'm talking about it mythically, but for me, it's just facing what I most hate about myself and what I most fear concerning myself. That's the darkness. And if I can go down there and deal with it, maybe I'll come out on the other end. Because in some ways, depression is my believing what I most fear about myself and what I most hate about myself. Those are true. for all time. And so my depression is sort of saying, well, fuck it then. You can't, what are you going to do? So I do think, I love the idea of Hermes as the leader into the underworld. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for example, I was reading this text about the Nassenes, and they were, again, 2nd century Gnostics, and very Judeo-Christian, very mystery school, but they were serpent worshippers and all that. And at one stage of going underground, before you go into the astral portal, Hermes shows up. So I was like, wow, they knew. Do you, in literature, in your studies, are there any great writers or thinkers that embraced Hermes or mentioned him or really depended on him?
Well, the period that I study most, Romanticism, most writers in that tradition, well, not most, but so like someone like a Blake or a Coleridge, and in England, and in America, someone like an Emerson or a Whitman, they were aware of the Hermes Trismegistus, this kind of mythical progenitor of the so-called Hermetic tradition.
Right.
Which is what really kind of blossomed in the early modern period. People like Jacob Böhme, Giordano Bruno, people like that who are kind of Neoplatonists in a way.
Right.
So it does have a Gnostic feel, but the demiurge isn't so bad. So for me, I mean, that's an important part. I mean, and I got interested in Gnosticism really by reading the Emerald Tablets of Hermes Trismegistus. Again, kind of a late version of Gnosticism. But interestingly, there was a French philosopher died 10 years ago or so. His name was Jacques Derrida. He was kind of famous for creating in my world this movement called post-structuralism. Mm-hmm. He has this beautiful essay called Plato's Pharmacy, where he talks about how Hermes shows up in Plato and how Hermes is the trickster. And of course, Hermes in Greece is like Thoth in Egypt. They're kind of the same. And he says both those gods created language, interestingly. And what does language do? Well, it tricks us because it creates fictions. And this is one reason why Plato was very suspicious of language and suspicious of poets, because they trick you. But at the same time, Plato himself was a poet in a way, right? He wrote these brilliantly dramatic dialogues with Socrates. So Derrida is really keen on the duplicity of Hermes as the creator of language, and really interested in how literary language just intensifies that idea that language both deceives and reveals at the same time. So I would say that's where Hermes shows up most prominently in my world, in thinking about what literary language does.
No, that makes sense. And I like how, what was I going to mention? Going back to what you were saying about simple actions. Yeah, they used to always tell me in AA, make your bed in the morning. I thought it was the dumbest thing for my sobriety, but it made sense, because if you could control that, you could add on to it. And of course, you hear about Jordan Peterson, clean your damn room. It sounds silly, but that you got to start somewhere.
It's the habit. It's the habit. And this is why someone like William James, he was, of course, writing around the time Jung was, a little earlier in America. And his principles of psychology, he's the one who came up with the term stream of consciousness. But he was really fascinated by habit. And he said, habits are ultimately what dictate our behavior. And most of us confuse habit with innate behavior. And he says, it's all habit. You may think you have a set character. No, those are just the habits you've chosen, which is, there's a lot of hope there, because it means that you can learn to change those habits. Of course, it takes a long time, and getting over addiction is changing a habit. And it can take years, if not more sometimes. And you're right to say too that just the tiniest things, if you do them over and over and over again, they become habits. And if you can make your bed every day, well, then maybe you can cut down to 2 drinks instead of 3, and then so on and so forth. It sounds so simple, but I mean, the underside, the ideas underlying it are profound. I mean, because it really says there's no such thing as a fundamental self. That a self is like a series of choices we make from minute to minute. And you might say, oh, fuck that, that's terrible, because there's got to be some like deep Eric Wilsonness or some deep Miguel Connerness. Like, well, maybe there's not. Maybe it's like I create Eric Wilsonness from minute to minute to minute to minute, So there's really no such thing other than what I'm choosing in each moment. So it's a terrible freedom. I mean, it's just a horrifying freedom, I guess.
But Eric Wilson and Miguel can have a happy childhood in this new.
That's right.
Just shift our perspective. We look at things differently, and we can rewire our brain. I remember going into rehab and the counselor saying, well, you got to change your thinking, but your brain has decided that it's going to do anything for cocaine and alcohol. So how do you do that? And me like, wait, yeah, my mind is already made up. How do I fight my own mind? And that's where the Hermes is, going into the underworld, tricking your own mind by making the bed, by faking until you make it. So
Tricking your own mind. That's great. That's what Hermes is. It's our ability to trick our own minds into healthier lives. That's fabulous.
yeah, and I mean, it's not all good news. Again, it's great talking to you, and I love talking to other people why this initiative started. But you start looking at life, for example, look at somebody like, let's say, Aleister Crowley. I've studied him. He's never spoken to me as a spiritual leader, but I have to admit that he spent 90% of his time trying to expand his consciousness. He was always meditating, doing some magic spell, sex magic. His whole life was for the higher worlds, despite his shortcomings as a human being. Sadly, his life ended with him just being a heroin addict. And then I look at somebody who I admire, who I think this guy has the greatest soul, and that's Alan Watts. I mean, what a beautiful human. I can say he's beautiful. He's a beautiful human being. But sadly, he ended up dying as an alcoholic. And I know it's because health issues led to drinking, led to alcoholism. So it makes me like, I am not out of the woods, and I could end up like Wallace, all these guys. Are there any stories of writers or great artists you think, well, this guy, he got to the end of his life happy? Or what's your take on the destructive nature of authors and seekers?
Well, I want to loop back down on Watts for a second. I mean, he's a huge hero of mine. I mean, I've gotten through very, very dark times listening to little cassette tapes in a Walkman as I would go running or walking, and I would listen to these tapes over and over again. That gorgeous, silvery British accent and his humor. But yeah, I read his biography, Zen Effects. I can't remember the author of it, and he's a terrible alcoholic. He just drink a bottle of vodka a day, basically near the end of his life. So there's that gap we're thinking about. Well, that gap shows up all over the place in my literary world. I think of Herman Melville would be a great example, who wrote the greatest novel ever. But his oldest son committed suicide in his bedroom while the family was there, and he himself had horrific depression and had a horrific marriage, and basically didn't write anything significant for the last 40 years of his life. And he's just one of many. And I think we don't have to say that genius and melancholy are wed, because they aren't necessarily. There are a lot of very happy men and women who write beautifully constructed novels and poems. But I really think that the burden of choosing to live the life of the artist it can be a very heavy burden. I mean, hell, any job's a heavy burden. I don't want to romanticize the life of the artist. That's not fair. But I think that to have to be that vulnerable in front of people almost every day. I mean, that's what artists do. They make themselves extremely vulnerable. This is what my insides look like exactly. Look at them, and will you publish my book? Will you buy my book? Will you put me in your museum? No. So it can take its toll, and I think that's what's so heroic about people who choose this way of life. But yeah, it just destroys so many. So turn to alcohol and drugs to deal with the rejection and the feeling of insecurity, so on and so forth.
Yeah, I think too, I feel that the poet is the shaman of our times. It deals with language, but poets really go into the great unconscious, not their personal unconscious. I think they go into the collective unconscious. Sometimes, the stuff, let's say, Emily Dickinson brings out, or Robert Frost, another very Gnostic person, like Melville, Moby Dick, the great Gnostic novel, but they bring out some powerful forces and demons out into the world. And yeah, the world is better because of this. What would we do without them? But they are like in ancient times, the shamans had to go to the underworld and fight these spirits, and sometimes they didn't make it out.
Well, you know, Joe Campbell, actually another hero of mine, kind of along with Alan Watts. He talks about, you know, shamans in Native American culture, and how a lot of these men were alcoholics because they were just wrecked psychologically because of all the work that they did. I mean, going down into these depths that you're talking about took a toll on their everyday lives. What I love so much about someone like Melville or Dickinson is that in some way they didn't know what they were doing in the best sense of the term. I mean, they got to places in their art for which there was no language to talk about that place. And they're like, well, what the hell do I do now? And there's just this kind of eruption of call it the collective unconscious, call it the great mystery of life, call it what you will. But for Melville to write Moby Dick in about a year, when he was like 31 years old, it just came bubbling, sloshing out. And you read that book, and there are a lot of logical inconsistencies. There are some characters that show up and don't show up again because he didn't know what he was doing, but in a great way. In other words, if you're an artist of great control, a writer of great control, you can write a really good novel, but it's not going to be crazy and mind altering and kind of culture changing like Moby Dick is. So I tell my creative writing students, you want to write yourself to a place where you feel really stupid. You know, if you're writing and you feel like you're in the groove and you're in the flow, fuck it. I mean, you're too easy on yourself. I mean, you really got to write yourself to a place where you don't know what you're doing anymore. It's hard to get there, but I think that's where we want to get, because that's where the juice is. That's where the real stuff comes.
Yeah, the psychic energies. And
Exactly.
I'm sure a lot of your students who probably, well, obviously look up to you, you're working with them, you're supposed to be working them for years. They must be full of fear and the unknown. What do you tell them for advice? Do you offer some authors or thinkers, or again, the cliche fear, false evidence appearing as real? That's what I say. Until it happens, it doesn't exist. It's a construct of my mind.
Well, I used to think I was wise 10 years ago. Now I think I'm pretty idiotic.
You're more like Socrates. You're getting closer to Socrates.
I hope, but I value, I mean, this is going to sound like the worst of cliches, but I just say, don't take it so seriously. I mean, if you, I mean, I feel like that's part of our problem in life, is we take things too seriously and we look for meaning with a big M. What does that mean? And when they write their essays and poems and stories, they're like, don't write something that means something. We don't care about that. Write about your radically unique, unprecedented, unpredictable experience. That's what we want. So I tell them, I say, look, life's meaningless. Don't search for meaning. If you search for tiny meaning, maybe, but don't search for big meaning, because you'll either find it and dupe yourself into being a dogmatist, or you won't find it and you'll be constantly frustrated. So just kind of find your groove. You know, find what makes you happy during the day. If it's watching movies, watch movies. I mean, don't have to be profound. I don't know. I just feel like a lot of times the intellect can embrace intellectualism, which is the kind of performance of understanding the world with the mind. And believe me, I did that for years. But I really want them to have a sense of play. Because the world's, it's a terrible, horrible place, and it's hard to find any play, and it's easier for some to play than others because of their socioeconomic position, because of their ethnic position, all that. So I'm aware of all that, but I really want them to get that when their mind is playing, that's when they're most themselves.
Yeah, when Hermes is out having fun.
That's
stealing
right.
the cattle of Apollo and
Yeah,
doing the things that Hermes does. So logos. And the conversations we've had is about past conversations about American exceptionalism, and we got to be happy, and we got to have property, and we got things that, and of course your book Against Happiness talks a lot about this. I think your book is more relevant than ever because the American dream is out the door, and we got to find something new. Don't you think, Eric?
That's absolutely the case. And that goes back to the beginning of our conversation, that yes, the American dream currently is kaput, and it has been for a while for most people. I mean, it's kind of been there for a certain socioeconomic echelon.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that the way we've been forced to look at America as a culture has been painful. A lot of people have suffered mightily, and I would never wish that on anyone over the past several months. But I do think it's an invitation to think about, not so much what does it mean to be American, but maybe so. I mean, because if America has always been, at least in its own mind, a place that values diversity, now's the time when we really can try to do that on a concrete level, not only on an abstract level. And I certainly know at my university, we're giving ourselves a very close look in terms of how we've dealt with issues of race. And I think in a way we have an opportunity to be a real America now, not just a bullshit America, but America is a place that can acknowledge, and respect difference. I don't know. That's not so much economic, but economically, yeah. I don't know. I've been living with a 5-year-old stepson who can't go to school, so I've had to come up with a lot of new ways to understand how I organize my day. So I guess that's a good thing. I like a lot of people have done that. They've had to sort of think about new ways to interact with their children. That's great. I mean, that's got to come out as a good thing of this terrible time.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Again, I have 3 small children. They're homeschooled, so I was prepared. I keep saying I'm prepared for these Gnostic times, this age of Hermes, as I call it, this Philip K. Dick world. I mean, and one last question, more sociological. Well, first I wanted to say it's interesting, and you can speak to either one of these last questions, but I love getting your thoughts on things. In one of our interviews, we talked about the Iron, the sort of trickster character, the Hermes character. We talked about how this was in Greek times, but Iago, Bugs Bunny was one of those. And speaking of the American dream, we said, well, people, what's the deal with Trump? I said, well, Trump is the American dream come true. I mean, you write about Norman Vincent Peale. Trump went to his church. This is America, the extroverted, bombastic. Let's do it. We got the president. We got the trickster god, the Igon that we deserve, and now we have to figure out what direction to take, regardless of what your stance is fine by you. The other one is conspiracy theory. I say we live in Gnostic times because in ancient times, people accuse the Gnostics of being paranoid. The whole universe is deep state. There's an archon in my body. There's an archon on the rock. Everybody laughed at them, but now conspiracy theory is no. Remember the days when conspiracy? I'd go to a UFO conference or a JFK conference, and it was separated. Now conspiracy has just joined the fabric of our culture. What do you think about these two issues that you want to speak to from a psychological or literary level? I mean, obviously, authors that you study were very paranoid to begin with. Right?
Well, definitely Philip K. Dick. I think I'd like to think about the second issue you brought up, because this has been most troubling to me. This idea that the kind of crazed conspiracy theorists have become mainstream, and this idea of there being some kind of empirical reality by which we measure claims is largely gone in most media outlets and for a huge majority of Americans right now. And I'm horrified by that. I mean, for all of my interests in the idea that language constructs reality, that the way we name the world is the way the world will appear to us, that sounds fine in a classroom. But when it comes to people sort of denying hard truths handed down by the Center for Disease Control, I'm like, what the fuck? So and there's no, I mean, I keep waiting for that grand cinematic moment when these people suddenly understand, like, oh, Grandpa got the virus, we should wear masks. But those moments don't come. So if reality has fled in a way, what then? And so that's kind of where we are. And I mean, in other words, what worldview, what actions will prevail in a world in which there is no reality principle, no empirical reality principle? When basically, if you're not on my team, whatever I say, you say is false. And if you're not on my team, I might do the same. What wins out? Is it charisma? Is it artistic grace? I don't know, but whatever wins out will probably not have a kind of traditional sense of integrity or authenticity. Because I think the idea of integrity and authenticity are very much compromised now.
Yeah. And I wonder, could it be just sort of a built up anger? I mean, I mean, we live in a time with the Iraq War, 2008. I mean, all the shenanigans of our leaders. At the same time, we live in a time where minorities have been just completely brutalized. Our cities are war zones. I mean, I see both the left and the right, why they're so pissed off and why they don't trust anything, like kind of like the late 60s. So in that way, I'm sure you can't blame them for rejecting whatever comes down the reality tunnel.
Well, it's interesting what you say. I mean, I'm talking about how in most major media discourse, there's no sort of empirical principle. But when you look at bodies, in particular black bodies, that's reality. I mean, a lot of black bodies are being brutalized and killed, and that's a kind of energy that does have a reality principle. And maybe it's finally that kind of energy which will push for some kind of hopeful change. I mean, it's a dark time in America, darker than it's ever been since I've been alive, and haven't been alive that long. But I think the good that's come from this is this acknowledgement of the brutalization of black bodies. And a lot of people in America, white people, have just not been aware of the extent of it. And now suddenly, oh, wow, fuck, that's terrible. So maybe that's a counter to what I've just said. Maybe on the one hand, you've got the conspiracy theorists who don't believe there's anything is real other than what I believe. But then you've got these suffering bodies and people gathering together around these suffering bodies, not black and white and other ethnicities, saying, fuck that. And we're going to push against what the prevailing system for a better world. I mean, I think strangely enough, I mean, that's the kind of a new kind of sensitivity might be emerging from this virus that wasn't there before. Again, when it comes to issues of race, that's the only thing so far that's come out of this that seems to be positive. So,
yeah, indeed.
The great questions, Miguel. I can't answer.
No, I don't know. Well, I don't have the answers either, Eric. That's why we're here. There might not be answers. It's just finding ways to overcome the fear, look inward, and make decisions from a place of wisdom. I think that's really the best we can do. Nobody has the answers.
No.
So great apocalypse. I think this is a great apocalypse, and as I say, it may not be the greatest time to be alive, but it's the greatest time to be awake because everything is being revealed from everybody. So.
Beautifully put. Yes, I agree with that.
Wonderful. Well, we're at the end. This has been a really great first Finding Hermes. For the audience, I do have the new features at the website for the program that's going to go. There will be more podcasts. We will try to, again, address mental issues, alcoholism, the suffering that's going today. So hopefully we can get through this year and these Gnostic times that are ahead of us, as I say. But Eric, as always, I really appreciate you coming on Aeon Bide, Finding Hermes, my house, wherever you are. I appreciate you very much.
I feel the same way about you, Miguel. It's been a true pleasure talking, and seeing you face to face has been fantastic. Really has. Yeah.
Thanks. And there you have it, my beloved truth seekers, the first episode ever of Finding Hermes. And thought I'd chime in since, again, it is our first episode and it's a special day or moment or new program. As many of you know, Finding Hermes was a call that I had a while back and something from deep within me. A project to help others during these or any other times of stress, times of mental stress and times of mental pressure. And as I have found my Hermes, my hope is to help you find your own Hermes, find your mind, find the potential in your mind, find the healing of your mind. And of course, by mind, I go more into the classic term, the nous, or modern terms, the psyche of Jung. Always great to have Eric on. He's an amazing cat, a cool cat, and his contributions to literature, to the esoterica, and to Gnosticism in general cannot be overstated. Rock on, Eric, and thank you. As of now, there's really no schedule or rhythm to Finding Hermes. There will be other shows coming out very soon, And I hope to get into my own rhythm to get you that gnosis, that hermetic wisdom and Gnostic wisdom of the ages, to help you find your own Hermes, as I keep repeating. But the program is out right now at thegodabovegod.com and as well as Patreon. And as with the show, there will be more features and more rolling out of benefits and features and so forth. Right now, if you go to the godabovegod.com, to the subscription area or to Patreon, you'll find 2 tiers. One tier is basically sort of a virtual Alexandria. It will be monthly meetings where we will meet as a group and we will share, well, things that have worked out for us. And I will share with you things that have worked out for me. I will also share the rituals, the magical practices, the insights that I have gathered on Gnosticism and Hermeticism for many years that you won't find anywhere else in such an authentic or holistic way, if you would. That will be one of the things that we will share on this tier. And also we will share what your problems are, what you need. We will also talk about the interviews too. Often I give interviews and we barely scratch the surface. So another option will be if you have questions about the interviews, about the guests, or about Gnosticism in general, we will discuss it. It's going to be very cool, and in a way it's finally making the virtual Alexandria a reality. Very interactive. And of course, I will ask you as a group what you want to learn, what you need in your life, and what you want to share with the rest of us. So, as I say in the show, divided we stand, together we rise. But we'll be together very much in this tier. The second tier will be a more one-on-one, similar to that. I'll find out what your needs are, and we will discuss it. You want to discuss the show, you want to discuss Gnosticism in general, you have questions for me. I will also, if you need, I will also provide a more personal connection with these Gnostic rituals that have really helped out me. We can talk about addiction issues, mental issues, whatever you need from me, I will provide. Again, these are things that have really helped me through my many years and have made me find Hermes and have made me really experience a lot of ecstasy and a lot of freedom in this crazy 2020. And it's time I share it with you. So check it out. And again, we will roll out more features in the next few weeks and the next months, and we will make the virtual Alexandria an incredible place that will culminate with a mystery religion project that I have. Well, I will guide you down into the undergrounds of Hades and up into the astral portals of the Gnostics. Very cool, and that's coming soon. Of course, I'd like to thank those who have really helped me out this year. As I like to say, or as I've learned, well, you cannot be fully divine or fully human unless you ask for help. That's what makes us human. That's what makes us who we are, and that's what helps us really find our potential. So with finding Hermes, I have gotten a lot of help. And I'd like to thank individuals who made this happen. These include Alex Sakiris, Gordon White, Jim West, Beth Martins, and Mitch Horowitz, too. All these individuals I consider my friends and have been there in various ways during the process of finding Hermes out. So thank you. And thank you all who support Aeon Byte in many ways on a weekly and monthly basis. So many ways. I can't thank you enough, but I'm thanking you now. One theme that I've learned this year is what I call laying the cards on the table. Or as Rush sang, rolling the bones in their song about defeating fate. After all, the only way to defeat fate, the only way to get around this bone-crunching destiny that we've had this year is really through gnosis, that awakening that breaks open the universe, that breaks open who we are and unleashes our divine spark. Very much like Neo did in the Matrix trilogy when he was able to break open and break out of the bonds of the Matrix, that great representation of fate. So that's one of the reasons I'm doing that. I am laying all my cards down on the table. As Joseph Campbell said, to be free, to be self-actualized, we must be transparent to the transcendent. I believe we have to be transparent to the world too. We must open ourselves out and lay our cards down on the table. That's because your story matters. Who you are matters. Your great narration, your journey across the spheres can help others and can make everything transparent where there is nothing to lose and nothing to gain. I think this is a very important theme this year. Cancel culture, no cancel culture, surveillance state or not. If we all become more transparent, then the empire will lose much of its power. And I'm laying my cards down on the table, as I said. This Finding Hermes is a risk. I mean, somehow through the craziness of 2020, this day job I had, there was a huge culling. The whole company was broken apart. And it was sort of like Samuel Jackson and John Travolta in Pulp Fiction when the guy's shooting them and they miss. The company was completely shot over by the archons of the company, and I survived. And somehow I ended up being a very well paid consultant in this new dispensation of the company. But I have to leave this because my call is Aeon Byte. My call is Finding Hermes. My call is to inspire you, as so many other great lights that I have met in my life have inspired me, to find Hermes, to unleash our potential, to unleash our power. So let's lay our cards on the table the rest of this year and moving forward, because like I said, we can defeat the empire that way. We don't even have to fight it. With that said, I'd like to end with a poem. Let me see, where's the poem? And the poem is by Adyashanti, a spiritual leader and guru. And I think it exemplifies the theme of rolling the bones and laying your cards on the table and really writing your own gospel and living your own myth. So here it is. Yaldi Baldi, you are the supreme being of the universe. Could you give me some music this time? Thanks, big guy. Here it is. Time to cash in your chips. Put your ideas and beliefs on the table. See who has the bigger hand, you or the mystery that pervades you. Time to scrape the mind shit off your shoes. Undo the laces that hold your prison together. And dangle your toes into emptiness. Once you've put everything on the table, once all of your currency is gone, and your pockets are full of air, all you've got left to gamble with is yourself. Go ahead, climb up onto the velvet top of the highest stakes table. Place yourself as the bet. Look God in the eyes, and finally, for once in your life, lose. I hope this has helped, and thank you very much for being with me on our first episode of Finding Hermes. Hello and goodbye as always.